Hello, and welcome to this webinar where we will be discussing the new GP6000 series, at this time the advanced models. Our agenda here looks like this. We're going to have an overview of the new GP6000 of the new series. We'll go into some hardware knowledge. We will discuss the system settings, which are different from the existing HMI series. We'll talk a little bit about how the software relates to the new hardware, and then we will show some links to some related documents. Okay, go getting into an overview of the GP6000 Advanced HMI. So what is the GP6000? Previously we discussed the GP6000 standard models, right? So in this webinar we're going to focus on the GP6000 advanced models, highlighted here in red. Wide range of screen sizes. It has modular design. It has an interface module, so it's expandable, and it's the successor of the SP5000 power in standard boxes, and currently is supported in GP Pro EX version 5.01 or later. Okay, so looking at our migration path from the existing SP5000s and GP4000s, our first priority, just because this is hardware that is going to go away faster than other hardware, which is the SP5000 open box, and consider that there are SP5000 open boxes also with Windows 7. So today the migration from a hardware perspective looks like going into a PS6000 box, a basic box, or a PSA 6000, the new all-in-one PCs. And then from a software perspective, it's the easiest migration, or perhaps an upgrade to a higher level, a different type of software in Blue or Blue Open Studio, which all run on Windows runtimes. Excuse me. The next migration is the SP5000 Power and Standard box, and then basically that's where we're targeting this GP6000 advanced model from this webinar. That's the typical migration path. And you also see there's a dotted line. If you wanted to get away from Windows, you could of course migrate these applications into these fixed, into these non-Windows GP6000s. When we look at the GP4000T, here we're talking about, of course, GP Pro EX, and if we want to upgrade our functionality, we can move into the advanced model, or we can kind of prefer a more one-to-one migration and go into the standard model. And then when we look at the lower grade GP4000Ws, those we can migrate to ST6000, and then in that case you can migrate to either Blue or stay on GP Pro EX. Okay, this is what the hardware looks like in the series in the 6000 advanced model. So we have 5 displays with wide format in capacitive touch. This note is talking about the new 15-inch wide HD models that will be released in Q2 of 2026 today. And then there's also 3 displays with a 4x3 format in multi-touch analog. And then there is down here, let me put my pointer on. Then down here we have the DIN rail mount unit with no display. Okay. Two power supply types, so you can have a 12 to 24 volt or AC type up to 240 volts. Also, these will have they do have expansion slots for flexibility. We'll talk about that later. And then the software support will be GP Pro, and then in the future will be supported by Blue. Okay, here's a pretty busy slide, so I'm not going to go over every exact point. One of the main points up here is note that even though these are 2-piece units, they are delivered as one part number, and basically the 2-piece is for maintenance. And I believe we have a slide coming up that will also show that. And then here you can see we're highlighting where the specifications are better than the existing standard models that we have today. Okay, if you want to take a further look, feel free to freeze the video. Again, here's another one. If you want to take a look at this slide, just please pause the video. I'm not going to go over the part numbering rules. Okay. Here's a better slide to kind of look at. This is the external view of what the advanced unit looks like. Obviously, this is the panel mount type, where we've got a box attached to a display. And note, these are the common displays so these are the same displays that we use on our IPC offering in the PS6000 series. You'll notice on the 4x3 models, we've got a front USB port uh, behind this hatch. And then this is what the rear looks like. Here's that expansion slot that we talked about. Over here on the side, we've got a battery slot, SD card slot. You've got some status LEDs. These are what the connectors look like here. This is what the connector arrangement looks like on the bottom here. Okay, here's that DIN unit. Okay, so you have a little bit. One thing to note on the DIN unit, of course, is let us find it, is the USB Type-C here coming out the bottom. Okay. Again, feel free to pause the video if you want to take a further look, but this is fairly self-explanatory. Okay, here's the modular structure that we discussed, right? So even though, like we said, like the SP5000, it is a modular structure where you have two pieces. You have basically a CPU back and a display front. But unlike the SP5000, these are ordered as one part number. And then they have maintenance accessories, so you can order these displays and the rear modules separately. So if the display breaks, for example, you don't need to replace the whole thing. You can just take the box off, put a new display on, and you're up and running. Okay, here are the expansion units that we also discussed. So what this is showing you here is for the GP6000, for the panel mount type, we can stack up to 2 of these units. And on the DIN rail type, we can stack up to 5. And then here are the units that we will have. This is an auxiliary unit, so this is just a unit. This is to maintain compatibility with the SP5000. So this is compatible with the auxiliary connector that existed there. This is basically an SRAM, or non-volatile RAM, expansion unit. So this is a quite interesting unit. This is allowing us to store more data in SRAM. So it's expanding our SRAM for data logging, alarming, etc. Here's a serial I/O unit, which has 2 serial ports, RS-232, 485, and then an Ethernet expansion unit. And note that this is a switching hub. So this gives us 1 additional IP address with 4 additional ports. And within the system menus now in the GP6000, you can set up IP. You could forward your IP traffic between ports. Okay. Here's the Type-C port on the GP6000. So this is what we were talking about, the advantage of the DIN rail type. So when we release the FP6000s with Type-C, basically what we'll have the ability to deliver power, video, and touch down one Type-C cable. And obviously that's the benefit to the user, and that's what that arrangement will look like. Okay, here's another slide. If you're interested, please pause and take a look. Oops, here, I'd like to go further. Okay, hardware. Diving in a little bit more deep into the hardware. Again, here's just another busy slide, and what we're doing here is we're comparing the SP5000 standard in power boxes versus the GP6000 advanced. You can see we've highlighted all the major differences. Okay, full HD for sure, more colors, different types of memory, larger size memory, and then DC and AC are the major points here. Okay, here's just some further comparisons. Again, feel free to freeze the video if you want more details. Okay, here's the DIN rail type comparing the SP5000 multi-converter to the DIN rail mount 6000. Higher resolution, more memory. Okay, more comparisons. Okay, here we're talking about easy and fast installation. We're talking about we will have the ability to do portrait mode in version 5.02. Today we do not. And here it's showing you that these different combinations are cutout compatible with the existing SP5000 series, except for these two models, except for the 15-inch and the 19-inch wide. And in that case, we have panel cutout adapters that are available. Okay. Moving on, here's a list of the optional interfaces between the SP5000 models and the GP6000. So you can see there's no crossover at all, essentially, from like the Profibus module, the Flex Network, Can Open, J1939, etc. Those are not available. But what will be available are those expansion units, which we just discussed. Here's some maintenance options. Again, I'm not going to go through these. These are all for the advanced. So again, if you'd like to take a look, check it out. Okay, so let's talk about the system settings in regards to the GP6000 Advanced HMI. First of all, there's an update to the initial setup flow regarding the password function update. And this is what's happening here is what you can see today. Let me put my pointer back on. What you can see, what we have today is when you currently boot up a new unit, you have the ability to do bypass and do not use a password. Okay, and what's happening is when you go into these different versions for the GP6000 Advanced and Standard, when you're in these versions, when you boot up a panel and you go into a new screen, you will not be able to bypass the use of a password. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides. So here's the slides that are talking about the initial setup flow, and basically the point here is that the out-of-box experience for the GP6000 is different from the existing 4000s and 5000s. So initially this is what it looks like when you power up the HMI, and then like we said, you do not have the ability anymore to bypass or skip to get to the next page. Okay. And of course what we said is for the new version of the system settings, the password selection, the skip button are removed to improve cybersecurity, and if users want to operate, of course, they can operate without a password after they create them. Okay, so here's the second part of the initial setup flow. So after you create the account, now you're basically you're just going to agree if you're going to make an Ethernet connection, and now you're back into a welcome. Now you get into a welcome screen where you can now go to the system settings, for example, where you can configure the IP address, the date and time, etc. What the new system menu basically looks like. Here's the example of what the system status screen shows you. It shows you what IP addresses you have, but you can see you've got a system monitor. This is where you set the date and time. You've got the ability to do a reset, a backup, and a restore, which is a very important point to note, which is a very different technique now in this new hardware series. Again, configuring the security, configuring Proface Connect. In the future, if we'll have an edge connector that you'll be able to configure, etc. So this is done in the background menu. This is different from just the offline menu that you get with GP Pro EX, and we'll show you a little bit more detail on that in the next slide. Okay, so this is what we know that we see today. This is what we're used to. After you download a program, basically you are able to go into the offline mode where you'll see a menu like this, and you still do have all these offline mode settings that are still in use. But you also have this setting down here for system settings, and the system settings is what's basically jumping us into our operating system where we are setting Ethernet settings, etc., just like we showed. And we have a little this. Okay, so let me play the movie for you. I figured out why it wouldn't play is because I had my laser pointer. So this is what it looks like. We're creating an offline menu. We're just going into the offline menu in the HMI. So there we are. We go to here. Here's our system settings. You could see it kind of boots into a whole new world now. And you'll see the user here. He's going to walk us through. Oops. He's going to walk us through some of this. I'll let this proceed so you can kind of get a feel for what this looks like. Okay, you exit that, exit, yes, and now we're back to our application. Okay, all right. So also note you can also access the system settings from a web browser for the only in the DIN mount type unit, right? Obviously, because it can be used without a display, right? And then this is actually a quite important point. And this is related to GP Pro EX today, and that is the way that you back up and restore the systems today has changed. What you're basically doing is you're not doing it within the GP Pro EX tool anymore. Essentially, what you're doing is you're back up and restoring through this system menu here, and essentially what you're doing is, for all intents and purposes, we're taking an image of the entire system now and using that as our backup file. Okay. Here's just some notes about that. Only administrators, right? So you can't do it unless you're logged in as an administrator. We need a 4 gigabyte or larger USB or SD card formatted as FAT32 or exFAT. And then you can kind of see here's the instructions. We go to the backup restore, and then we have to connect. You can follow this along. I don't need to read the instructions back to you. So if you're interested, um, please just check it out. And again, this is all referenced in the GP 6000 hardware manual. And here we're talking about how you restore it also. Okay, so you can also do this because this is just giving you an example of you can use the same backup file created on one unit, right? And it has to be the same model number again. So you have to be very careful that your image, because this is kind of an image, the hardware needs to match. Okay. Again, this is just showing us again here. This is where we're doing the IP address settings. This is comparing it to the way it was in the GP 4000 and how it is today. Okay, so now getting into just a few slides about the software and how the software is relating to the GP 6000 Advanced Series within GP Pro EX. Here you can see you'll just have a selection now for standard and advanced. Here's a screenshot of what the DIN box looks like in the selection. Okay, and then this is just talking about stuff we talked about before with the new logo with GP Pro, etc. Here's another new feature with GP Pro is this PDF viewer. Okay, and here's just a little illustration here running on the side. Okay. You'll notice that was triggered from an alarm, but you can also just trigger it through a control word. Okay, so just showing you some attributes of the PDF viewer. Okay. Okay, so now some related documents. Note that we do have, this is just a general slide about the TVDAs that we do have posted on proface.com. So this is just a generic slide telling you about generically what we're doing with these different TVDAs. And then here's different links to these different TVDAs. And what I will do is I will come up with a way to put these links in the description of the video, either through one link that will get you to the main page, or perhaps I'll put in the individual links like you see here. But this was just ported from a PowerPoint document, so that's why you see all these different links here. Okay. Here's just a note about some replacement guidebooks from GP 4000 and 3000 to the 6000 standard. Again, I'll put the link in the video. And just note, you can just check this out if you're interested in any of these migrations. There are guides to do this. They are quite nice. Okay. All right. So thank you for watching. Hopefully this was a useful introduction to the new GP 6000 Advanced Series HMI from Proface. Thank you for watching.